It's Enemy Sidelines presented by Microsoft. My guest this week, Dani Sureck. She's a team reporter for the Arizona Cardinals. Dani, I normally ask reporters about their team, but it seems like there's a lot of familiarity with this Cardinals team and the Texans. So we'll get to that in a bit. But first of all, sitting at 6-0, the only undefeated team in the NFL. This team seems pretty talented in all phases. Does this Cardinals team have any weaknesses?
If we were going into this last week's game against the Browns, it would have been really easy to say it's the run defense. But of all weeks for this Cardinals defense to figure it out, it was this past week against the Browns, who had the #1 rushing team in the league, and they held them to just 73 rushing yards. So it seems like on both sides of the ball, this Cardinals team has really found a way to be cohesive, and they've done so with injuries and adversity, not only with players, but with coaches as well who weren't on the sideline. So there aren't any blaring concerns on this team right now. And I think that's what makes them so scary, is there's not necessarily one easy part about this team for opponents to pinpoint to attack.
Yeah, you mentioned missing the coaches. I was going to say, last week, maybe not having your head coach on the sideline, but that really didn't even seem to be too much of a deterrent for a Cardinals team that really beat up on the Browns. So Cliff Kingsbury, obviously we know how the COVID protocols go, but if he doesn't get his 2 negative tests, obviously he can't be on the sidelines against the Texans. But if he is, do you think there's anything that he could take out of that Browns game that maybe he might do in the future, like delegate play calling or do anything differently, since it did seem to go so well for the Arizona team?
I'm not sure about delegating play calling for it by any means, but I think maybe giving Kyler Murray some extra freedom. And I'm not saying that in the sense that he's, had him change and just doesn't take Kyler Murray's input at all, because that's not the case. But after the game, Kyler even kind of joked about having a little more freedom, making those audibles as he's reading the defense. So I would think maybe that would be something that might change moving forward. But we heard from all of the coaches that the reason they were able to so seamlessly fill those roles, because Cliff Kingsbury is not only the head coach, he's the offensive coordinator, and he's the play caller. So there were a lot of moving parts for this game. We heard defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, who split those head coaching responsibilities. He talked to the media after the game and said the reason it was so seamless is because of how Cliff Kingsbury creates the game plan and works with the coaches throughout the week. So it really wasn't too difficult for them to step in and take over those responsibilities.
All right, you mentioned Kyler Murray, so it's year 3 for him. So far this year, 14 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns. It seems like he's using his legs less. Do you think that's part of his success this year? And how have they approached using his legs versus using his arm to get some of those first downs?
That's absolutely been intentional. The key is to keep your quarterback safe and healthy. And Kyler has the skills to get out of the pocket, to scramble and extend those plays. And they're not trying to take that away from him, but not necessarily have him focus so much on the run game. And they don't really need to this year, because you have Chase Edmonds in the backfield as your starter, your shifty running back. But they brought in James Conner this offseason, and that's been their downhill guy to wear out these defenses. So he has his weapons in the backfield, and we know he has plenty of options down the field with DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, AJ Green, Rondale Moore. There's plenty of options for Kyler Murray to choose instead of just using his legs. We actually saw that against the Browns. There were a couple plays where Kyler had yards in front of him to take, but instead he waited for the play to carry on, went through his checkdowns, and ended up passing the ball instead. So it's definitely been intentional for this Cardinals offense to not rely on Kyler Murray to use his legs so much this year.
Yeah, you mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. Obviously, we've seen the mind-blowing plays that he makes on the field, and the touchdown catches. He is second in the NFL with 6 touchdown catches. But I saw something a few weeks ago where people were talking about his lack of receptions. Is that just a matter of having so many weapons on offense, or is there a concerted effort to get more targets for Hopkins?
I think it is just trying to spread the wealth, and I think it's more so it's really a respect to DeAndre Hopkins, because he is one of the best in the league at that position. And so opponents are going to key on him. Of course, they're going to want to double team him. They're going to want to put their best cornerbacks on him. And look, if you leave DeAndre Hopkins one-on-one, it's not even really a 50-50 chance. It's going to go to D-Hop. But by defenses focusing on Hopkins, that's allowing A.J. Green, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore to get open and to make those big plays. And remember, there's going to be new Arizona Cardinal on the field this week and tight end Zach Ertz. So I would expect he's going to get some looks as well. So it's not necessarily that they're not targeting DeAndre Hopkins on purpose. It's just that he's getting so much attention from the opponents that it's leaving these other receivers open.
Okay, so you mentioned Zach Ertz. We saw the news recently that the Arizona Cardinals were going to trade for the Philadelphia Eagle after they lost Max Williams to a knee injury. So what is going on with the timing of that? Why was it so important for them to sign Ertz right now? Was it just a matter of getting another tight end? Was it Ertz that they really wanted? What did they like about him and how he fits into this offense?
I think this team is understanding that they are hot, and you don't want to stop that momentum. And Max Williams played such an important role, not only as a catching tight end, but as a blocker. And so that's something that they were looking to replace. And Zach Ertz, who throughout the league, we've kind of known throughout the media, he's been wanting out of Philadelphia for the last couple of years, and this just seemed like the right fit for him to come to a team that is winning, that has an explosive offense, and has a role for him to play. And you can't not be excited about Zach Ertz. He's been in the league for almost a decade, Pro Bowler. He won the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think the Cardinals are really excited to get that skill set of not only a reliable receiving tight end, but someone who can really help in the blocking game as well.
All right. So J.J. Watt, we've all seen what he can do here in Houston. And Vance Joseph was actually defensive backs coach here as well a while back. So they've had their familiarity. And now J.J.'s in Arizona. And I saw that he put up his first sack of the year in Cleveland. There's a lot of buzz about how well Watt is playing for that defense, even though the numbers may not necessarily reflect it. Is he doing anything differently in Arizona than he was on this Texans defense? He used to move around a lot on this D-line. So is there anything different that he's doing with the Cardinals, or is it really that same JJ just moving around on the line?
I think it's to an extent, it's the same JJ. I mean, he's going to be a monster anywhere you put him on the field. But recently, when he was talking to us here, the media this past week or so, he was explaining that that's because he's really just focused on his job. There are so many playmakers here on this Cardinals defense. He doesn't necessarily have to move around and always be that guy to make the play. And so by just focusing on his job, that's going to allow these other defenders, Marcus Golden, Jordan Hicks, who also had multiple sacks last week against the Browns. That's going to allow them to get to the quarterback and force fumbles. And it's also going to force the opponents to know that they can't just focus on J.J. Watt, which of course is going to allow him more leverage to get to the quarterback. So it's really just him. He was saying he's just focused on his job, but he is coming off back-to-back amazing games, the 49ers and the Browns last week. And that's just because he's getting comfortable in this scheme. He wasn't participating throughout training camp. So of course it's going to take a little time to get used to things, but he is really picking up steam here, and he's had great games, and that's not always based upon the sack numbers. He had a strip sack, and so that was recovered by the Cardinals, and they put up 7 points on the following drive. It's so much more than just those sack numbers, but J.J. Watt has absolutely had a phenomenal last 2 weeks, and they expect him to just continue to trend upwards.
Yeah, we thought that one of the beneficiaries of J.J. Watt being there would be Chandler Jones, and in that first game, he had 5 sacks against Tennessee, but he hasn't really put up the same sack number since. Now, I know he's on the COVID list, or he was on the COVID list, but how has J.J. Watt's presence affected Chandler Jones and some of the other playmakers on that defense?
I think when you have a veteran who is as respected and has been so successful at their position as you do with J.J. Watt, the other players are going to take notice. They're going to look at his work ethic on the practice field and how he's taking care of his body and focused in meetings and what he does in the games and how he's motivating other people in that leadership role. And that's huge in the locker room. And so I think that when you have someone with J.J. Watt's experience and his leadership and the way that he focuses on the game and takes every snap so seriously and is so intense in his play, it's infectious. And so the other players are definitely going to pick up on that and step their game up.
All right, Dani, I wanted to ask you about the Cardinals schedule. It seems like they're playing really well on the road, and their home games, even though they've won them, have been a lot closer. What do they make of that?
I think this team is really just what they say of being focused 1-0 every week, regardless of where they're playing. They are 6-0, which is the first time this franchise has started 6-0 since 1974. So it's really taking a lot mentally for this team, regardless of who or where they are playing, to not get swept up in that. Being undefeated is not the end goal, and this team will tell you that. So it's really starting to get to the point of the season where mentally it's really tough of you have to stay focused of not getting caught up in the fact that you're undefeated and you're beating these teams, these good teams. I think that's something maybe the national media is kind of missing in their coverage with the Cardinals, but that's what they're focused on, not necessarily whether they're on the road or at home, but just that 1-0 mentality every week. Now, they do get to be back at State Farm Stadium. They have been on the road a lot so far this year, so they've got a 2-game homestand. They've got the Texans and then Thursday Night Football against the Packers. So they're excited to be home and be around their fans, but they're still having to really stay focused mentally on just 1-0 every week, because you don't want to get caught up in the confidence or, the attention from the media of being undefeated.
What are they making of this Texans team coming out to face them at home? Obviously, the record is not where the Texans want it to be, but 6-0 team facing the Texans, who have only won one game this year. How are they sort of viewing this matchup?
I think it just goes back to the last question about this being really tough mentally. Of any team, it doesn't matter what the record is, the team you're facing. Anything can happen in the NFL. Every player, every team is a good team at this point in their career. So it's about staying mentally focused. And again, not comparing the fact you're going into a game as an undefeated Cardinals team going up against a 1-5 Texans team that's been struggling. The Cardinals are not going to want to play down to anyone by any means. They're just going to want to stay focused and just try and get this win and then move on to Green Bay. It's going to be a very quick week here in Arizona.
All right. Well, familiar faces on Sunday, and it'll be interesting to see. First time for J.J. Watt and DeAndre Hopkins facing the Texans and the Texans facing them. Dani, thank you so much for the time, and we look forward to chatting soon.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching, and go Texans! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for new content.